Hello, Cloud Hire family. I'm your host, Sufiyan Ishaq, founder and CEO of Cloud Hire, and I have a very special guest for you today. Executive search consultant, global recruiters of Low Country, decorated and senior retail executive that specializes in search for retail as well as executive coaching. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Good morning. How you doing? Or good evening, I should say to you, but how are you? Nice to finally meet you face to face.
Yeah, pleasure, Kevin. So, Kevin, before we do dive into the nitty-gritty of what we have planned today, do you want to give the audience a background of the career that you've had?
Sure. Like so many people in the retail industry, I graduated college with an accounting degree and not really sure what I wanted to do. And somebody introduced me to some people at Bloomingdale's, and I went to work there a few years in the finance department. And after that, I moved on to luxury retailer Saks Fifth Avenue, where I had the opportunity to travel all around the country and see the stores. And that's when I was bit with it, that I wanted to be involved in retail, running stores, operations, that kind of thing. So from there, I progressed to the limited brand. Lastly, after a 10-year run at the Gap and being one of the first people to be hired at Old Navy when it was just an idea, I finally went on to work at Ann Taylor and Loft. And interim between there, I was doing a little executive coaching and business management consulting. And here I find myself today, post-pandemic. I'm back to coaching, consulting, and as you said, doing executive search for retailers.
Amazing. So you've worked practically everywhere in retail that isn't ultra high luxury. Well, you may have had consulting experience, but not executive, I'm assuming.
Well, and the funny thing is, through those years, I was exposed to national retailers, luxury department stores, big box. So I really got a feel for, all facets of the industry itself. And it doesn't matter where you work. It's a great industry. It's exciting. And it's under such tremendous change with everything that's going on with the introduction of all the technology tools that, didn't exist not that many years ago.
Yeah, technology is, a double-edged sword. It's been great for a lot of people, and then on the flip side, it's not. But one thing that has become, pretty much standard now is the advent of sending a resume to everywhere that you apply. We've seen a really big volume of resumes coming in for the jobs that we post, but our jobs are remote. For retail, right, it's a bit different. Well, actually, quite the opposite. You have to actually be in the location that you're applying for so that you can go and do your day-to-day. How do you really dissect these sort of resumes, and what do you think people should have on it so that they can land an interview with someone like you?
Well, just one thing I do want to say, the remote or hybrid piece obviously doesn't work for store people and people out in the field, but it is getting more and more common in the home office for certain kinds of jobs that can be either done remotely or maybe 1 or 2 days a week in the office. But what I would say is that, if you look at a job posting that is on LinkedIn, for example, and all of a sudden 1 week in, there's 700 people applying, you've got to sit down and say to yourself, that's 700 people. How do I make myself stand out? And the first piece is, before a human set of eyes get on your resume, you got to get through the applicant tracking system. And there are some things that you can do there. And I would say to anyone listening that says, I applied for a job and I checked every box that they mentioned, yet I either never heard back or I got a form letter saying they were going to pass on my resume. And I would say there's a really good chance that you didn't get past the applicant tracking system. The first thing I would say that you have to do is you must treat your resume as a working document that changes for every single job that you're applying for. And when you take your resume and hold it next to a job description, you need to ask yourself, am I saying the same thing that's on that job description, but possibly using different words and different phrases? Because the algorithm in the applicant tracking system is not going to be able to differentiate. And there's a good chance that's why you're getting kicked out. So that's number one. Your resume must be a working document, and you must take the time to apply it to that particular job that which you're applying for. The second thing I would say is if you're applying for different kinds of jobs, let's say you're a digital marketing person, but you also have skills in social media. You are not going to have the same resume that you will submit for either one of those jobs at two different companies. So that's the other piece that you have to keep in mind. All right. So let's say you get past the applicant tracking system. You got to start from the top. You got to look and ask yourself, do I have all the relevant information, simply put, to the point, and really making it easy to get my contact information that is accessible to the person that's looking at it. It's about the type of language that you use. When you do your summary, it's not about I words, I did this, and I was hired to do that, and I was recruited. It's really about, in that summary, not having passive words, but things that I was able to accomplish and do to help an organization move forward. Action words like created, delivered, designed, directed, those kinds of words are really critical to really make yourself stand out. You can look at a LinkedIn job request, and in 1 week, you'll see 700 people on there. So what are you doing to make yourself stand out from those other folks? I think that's key. One of the things I would say to anybody that's applying for a job, be your own worst devil's advocate and ask yourself with everything you put down, so what? What is that saying about me? What does that do to make me stand out from the crowd, look more unique, more special, be a person that is really interested enough that that person that's looking at my resume is going to want to continue to go through it? Like to say something like, I was hired to oversee web development. Well, I already know that from your title. So you wasted that opportunity to grab my attention. And I truly believe the top 20 to 25%, the first page of your resume, and your resume should not be more than 2, but that is critical. Reason being, and there's all kinds of numbers out there, but you can go online and Google it. And I've read as little as a talent acquisition person looks at a resume for 7 seconds to no more than 30. So if you don't grab them early on, they're not getting to that second page or even to the bottom of the first page. So ask yourself that question, so what? All right, so let's say you get past the applicant tracking system and, when those human eyes are on it, you've done a great job on the top of the page, but you have to ask yourself about the formatting. Make it simple, make it flow, make it so it's easy for that person to see the things they need to find on your resume. And the way I would say it to you is if you think about buying an appliance or something that you have to put together and you start reading the directions and you can't follow them, it's too wordy, it jumps all over the place, how frustrated you get with it. You have to think about your resume the same way. Make it easy, simple, and have a flow to it that the person looking at it, because that format is well laid out, is able to find the key points that you're trying to get across to them. And also they can marry it back to the job description. It cannot be too busy, and it should not include everything that you've done in your career. So in those experiences, the other thing that I would say to you is, I really think your last job, or maybe your last 2 jobs at most, no essays. No one's going to take the time to read it. Like a bullet format with 3 to 5 accomplishments, experiences, and, maybe some hard stats of things that you were able to do. And again, remember to use those action words in what you're putting down. I think, too often I've seen individuals say things like, I'm looking to build my skills. Well, that's not going to interest me as a talent acquisition person. I want someone who can tell me what their skills are, and it can relate back to the job that we're hiring for. All right, so I said, keep it to a max of 2 pages. Ask yourself, do I have too much information in there? Do I have things that aren't really relevant to the job itself? If you were all conference in football in high school and you're applying for a national sales job, that doesn't relate. Take that off your resume. Keep the focus on what does it have to do with that job? Again, so what? Every single thing you put down, ask yourself, so what? And does that make me appear as a better candidate.
Kevin, absolutely phenomenal advice. As somebody that reads hundreds of resumes on the daily, I think that every single point that you've made was spot on. I see it too many times. The
Yeah,
five-page resumes, the horrible spacing between, whatever they're trying to put in, horrible structure. They list their skills at the bottom of the page, and those people get disqualified first. So it's
exactly.
definitely, a really big thing to have the right format, concise information, and not giving too much information because nobody's going to read it. You kind of have to be practical about it just to
I
get
mean,
through
that
that.
resume is a conversation starter. It's not a download of everything you've accomplished in the last 2 decades.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Exactly. Too many people fail to recognize that. But one thing that's becoming a problem, and we were just talking about technology before we dove into the resume itself, is that people are using AI to write their resumes. And now they're getting to those applicant tracking systems, but it's not any good because once you hop onto that first interview, it's a disaster. And people are just trying to, there's a slow progression where resumes themselves are becoming kind of obsolete. People are beginning to trust them less and less on the daily. And that kind of segues us into what can we do to really secure a job or at least an interview that's not based on let me apply for this job, the traditional format. And I think the biggest thing that you can do is create a solid network. What would you say about that, Kevin?
oh, listen, I tell this to people all the time. I think the single most important thing that you can do is really work on a network. And in doing so, it's not just to get, I've got 8,000 contacts. I've got 9,000. That's not what it's about. It's about people who you can connect with in a genuine way to develop a relationship, because it is so important that when you do see a job, whether it's on, Indeed or LinkedIn or any of these other tools, to have someone that could maybe do an introduction for you is critical. Because again, the example I gave early on, 700 other people applied. Yes, you have to make your resume stand out. But if someone can introduce you to the hiring manager, to the person who's over that department, that is going to do wonders for you. And I must tell you, the starting point for most jobs is typically LinkedIn. Love it or hate it, it's the best tool out there at this moment for most jobs. But so many folks, joined in 5 years ago, put in their skills, put in their information, and rarely goes back to update it. And I think misses a great deal. And I would say keeping your LinkedIn updated is extremely important. And also commenting on things that are germane and of interest to you. And comments aren't just like, oh, that's great, oh, love it. It's something that shows that you have a perspective. And I think people need to stay active that way. So, getting back to the connections, there's so many things that you can do, because I think once you connect, you then have to reach out and try to have a conversation to get to know the person. You can set up a call, set up a Zoom if they're in the same city or town you're in, even meet them for coffee. And you not only can learn about their company, you can learn about what they're doing. And maybe you might realize, wow, that's a skill that they have that I don't have, that maybe I should be looking into. How do I grow myself and make myself more attractive to a potential hiring company? And the other thing that I would say about networking, when I go to LinkedIn and I see someone's contact information and all they have is their LinkedIn URL, and they don't regularly go to look at it to see that they've received a message, it makes it absolutely impossible. I remember I was doing a search for a business data analyst back in February or March of last year. And I reached out to people, and the only way I could reach them was through a LinkedIn Connect. As recently as the other day, I've had people send me their resume and say, I'm interested in the job. It's almost a year later. So you're really doing a disservice to yourself. I think at one point there was this idea that if you put your head down, do your job, really focus, good things will come your way. And I don't believe that's the case any longer. You've got to put yourself out there. You got to think of yourself as a brand. And how do I grow my brand? Just like the organization I work for talks every day about how do we grow our brand. So those opportunities are there, and you just have to take the time, and it doesn't take a lot of time to really take advantage of them.
Yeah. A point in my career, I used to think that having a personal brand was more like, I don't want to become a celebrity. I don't really care for a personal brand. But it's
Same.
just not the
Guilty.
case. All right. Like, your reputation precedes you before you enter any engagement or conversation with someone. And the first thing that people do is they look you up on LinkedIn, especially in the professional setting. And if they go and they see what your opinions are and that you're active in the community, it really sets a positive impression for them before they start speaking to you. And it paves the way really forward compared to having no information out there about you whatsoever. So you're not trying to become a celebrity, you're just trying to show how authentic you are as a person and how skilled you are in the areas that you claim to be competent in.
I agree. And you use the word authentic, and it's a great word, because if you're not authentic, people will smell that out right away, that it's one-sided. I'm reaching out to you just to see what you can do for me, either today or down the road. That doesn't fly. But and I know we're starting to go off into a LinkedIn discussion, but I look at things when I look for candidates, and I just was doing it this morning, and you look at their skills, and you can do as many as 50, and I don't think you need 50, but you need 20 that are really relevant, and they need to be 20 that are forward looking versus when you joined 8 years ago, and maybe those skills are not as important today or as important in the job you're doing today. You've got to keep that updated. And when you list your job, to just have your position and the time that you've been in that position doesn't tell me anything about you. That's not going to have you, just like the resume, it's not going to have you stand out from anybody else with that title or a similar title. So yeah, the branding piece is important. And I absolutely understand what you said about, trying to make yourself a celebrity or that kind of thing. You're doing a disservice to yourself if you're not taking the time.
Exactly. And there's a fine line that people just don't understand over there. Like, you're not there for the attention, but you're there to demonstrate who you are. And, as a recruiter, as a search executive yourself, before you hop onto a call with someone, if you can kind of identify how they may or may not fit into your company culture based on their social appearance, it might be a lot easier for you to make your decisions versus if I see a piece of paper that I don't fully believe and then I'm investing time into talking to you just to, end up disqualifying you. There's a level of certainty that I gain from being able to see your, personal brand online.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, little things like grammatical errors or spelling errors, that's a killer.
Yeah.
It speaks about your attention to detail.
Yeah.
I don't think job gaps are a cardinal sin. I mean, they're, especially in this world of restructuring, layoffs, and start working with a startup brand that maybe ran out of money. Like, there's an understanding, but you have to be prepared to be able to explain what that's all about. Careers that you don't see a progression, the position a person's in might be a concern, or even job hopping. A year here, 9 months here, a year and 3 months here. There could be an explanation, but it is going to raise some questions about culture, what's important to a person, and their ability to the type of decisions they're making. I think all of those things are critical. I know many folks go to social media to see what kind of things is the person posting, to get a read for what do they really like as an individual. Mm-hmm. And I guess, and this might be my personal bias, but when you just see a really silly email address that they use, it kind of just speaks to, potentially
it's fine if you made it in high school, but you could always just change it. It's time to
exactly, and that's usually what it is. And it's funny you said that in high school. I find that is more the case with more entry level people who have not bothered to say, hey, you know what? I'm not in high school anymore. I'm going out into the real world. I need to have something that looks more professional.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. We've kind of spoken about how I can position myself to get a job, if I'm looking. But on the other side of the window, sitting as a recruiter, how can I position myself so that I can get the best quality of candidate through my pipeline?
Well, I say the first thing is you got to take a step back. And when we take on an assignment from a client, we will spend several hours with them asking a lot of details about everything from why is this position open? If there was somebody in it before, what was it that either they didn't accomplish or maybe they got promoted? We will also be very curious about the work environment. How big is the team? What are people's roles? And other things such as really the culture and the mission of the company and how they view it, and what kind of people do they find and get themselves into that more easily. Because that onboarding piece is so critical. Organizations want people to hit the ground running, but they have to be able to set them up to do so. So all that insight that you get in those conversations, as you start having conversations with candidates and you ask some very leading questions and then the follow-up question and the follow-up question, this might make sense for this individual or maybe not. And if it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just not a good fix. I mean, I kind of look at it like, a relationship. You take somebody out to dinner and you go to a movie and at some point you start to see common likes, common experiences, but also maybe that person brings a perspective that's different than yours that gets you thinking. And it all depends on what the organization wants and how that person sees themselves fitting into that organization. I think you got to be very transparent when you explain to the candidate about the organization and the things that they value and find out, is that something that works for you?
Yeah, we're in agreement. Culture is absolutely imperative to the success of an organization. And it's like they say, a chain is only strong as its weakest link. So
Exactly.
You have to be super careful of the type of people that you're onboarding and making sure that they will suit the culture that you guys have. And as an external search partner, we have to make sure that every single person that we speak to in a company really helps us understand their culture, understand the type of people that would work best with them so that we can go and in turn find that person for our client.
Yeah, you think about the fact that, let's say a position is open and thousands of dollars are spent trying to source, talk to candidates to get that person to come on board. And then if they come on board and it doesn't work for them and or you've now wasted all this time and you got to go back to the well. And, there's that hard to nail down number, but open positions can get very, very expensive in missed revenue, but also in, productivity and workload, only to bring in someone who doesn't fit the bill or doesn't want to become part of the organization based on something that maybe they didn't understand. And I've heard so many people when I've asked them about an experience they've had, and they say, I should have asked that question. I should have dug deeper in that. And it's out there, before you join a company, not only Glassdoor, you go to the online analyst reports to find out what's going on in the company. Again, through your networking, you talk to people who work at that company and say, tell me what you like, what you don't like, what works. What would you change if you could change? You could learn a great deal about organizations that you shouldn't get in there and in 60 days say, oh my gosh, I made a mistake.
Yeah. If you can't find anybody in a company that kind of suits your personality and has the same moral outlook as you and vision and, drive, you might be in the wrong place. And it's better to, be safe than sorry, join the company and find out later. So
Totally.
Yeah, networking is a hack. I mean, not only can it get you the opportunity, but it can make sure that you don't waste your time on the wrong opportunities, because those exist. And, there are times, and you might not see it right away when, you need the money, you need a job, but there are times where you're better off not working for an extra 2 weeks and taking the opportunity that suits you better.
And ask yourself some really hard questions about what is it that I really want? Why did I leave my last organization? And will this new organization give me what I was searching for?
Yeah, I agree. And as far as, you were just discussing, you speak to everybody in an organization and you try to understand their culture. Do you have any tips in particular to really place a culture and big aspects that you're looking for right away in both the company's culture and a person's behavior to know if they're going to match that culture?
Oh, that's such a great question. When I think in terms of the workforce of today, it's Gen Z and millennials. And pretty soon it's going to be Gen Alphas. It's not going to be that long. And I think COVID plays a really huge role in this because I think some of this stuff, whether it's the social issues, DEI, the ability to grow in your position, being respected, and trust in the leadership of the organization. You could just go on and talk about all the things that Gen Z and millennials have very strong opinions about and don't want to give up on them. Things like work-life balance. All of these issues come to the forefront, and I think organizations need to say to themselves, what are we doing to attract the next group of people that we need to keep our organization moving forward? Are we an organization that values people and puts career opportunities out there for them? And do we have folks in leadership that understand not only the hard skills, but the soft skills? I mean, how many times have you seen somebody who was a really great producer, really delivered the numbers, and someone decides, let's make this person a manager over people? Well, all of a sudden, they're not responsible just for themselves, but they're responsible for a team. Are organizations spending the time and effort to make sure this person understands not just the hard skills, but things like empathy, things like how to talk to people, how to help people set goals, how to help people achieve them, how to be supportive to them? Because that's what this next generation or so really is going to demand in their organizations. If sustainability is one of the hot buttons with the environment, and your organization's not practicing it, and it comes up from the rank and file, leadership needs to figure out, well, what does that mean to us, and how do we address it? And how do we show the respect by, for example, including the folks that are saying, why aren't we doing this on a cross-functional team to figure out how do we move the business forward? And it's not placating, it's making your business a desirable place and a good corporate citizen.
Yeah, it's also about adapting because, I see it way too often in businesses. They have leadership that is a little bit more senior, and maybe, the core team is a little bit more senior. They're kind of stuck in their ways. New talent comes in, but they're not able to express themselves or their ideas effectively enough to create change where they would like to stay in that organization and keep working there. And they usually get pushed out. And you see the organization aging, and it's just like a country, right? Like if the organization is aging and there isn't younger people coming in to keep it alive, you're on a downward track right there. As senior management ages out, you're going to have a really big problem replacing them, and the company itself needs to be able to adapt quickly enough. So yeah. I think that's exactly what you're, kind of getting at. The Gen Z and Gen Alpha crowd is less than a decade away from becoming the primary, entry-level candidates that are coming into companies. And there's a huge volume of them compared to the millennials in general. So these people need opportunities, and they need opportunities. They want opportunities at places that they want to believe in, long-term vision alignment, mission alignment. And it's just not going to happen unless management really looks at it really long and hard and makes changes from the bottom to the top.
I really think we're at this inflection point where it needs to be addressed, and the organizations that don't address it will suffer. I think people want meaningful work, and work that their values align with the organization. And organizations are going to have to innovate. They're going to have to innovate about, not to say, well, skills needed are going to require, so we're going to have to find people who have those skills. I think big organizations in particular are going to have to figure out, how do we take what's in our organization today and allow them to grow in those skills? I was just at the NRF in the beginning, the National Retail Federation at the Javits Center in New York, and 40,000 plus people there. And everything was about AI and generative AI. And organizations trying to figure out, what does that mean? What does that mean to marketing? What does it mean to the sales side? What does it mean to social media? And there's a lot of questions out there. Well, will you have a workforce that is able to adapt to the changes in the business? Or will you have one that's hanging on and will not be able to help you move forward? So big questions out there.
Yeah, and I think, there's a duality over there. The organization, of course, has to prepare itself, but the people that are working in the organization also need to understand that adapting is a requirement and they shouldn't feel like it's unfair. I have a lot of people that I speak to and they're like, hey, why should I compete with this person that's younger than me? And, from their perspective, that younger person has much higher value skills than you. And it's not fair to them that they have to come and report to you anyway. You know what I mean? If you really think about it intrinsically, you should adapt, you should learn, and you should stay in touch with whatever is new and trending. And as people, I don't feel like it's hard at all. If you are open-minded and learning, you should be able to adapt to any and all new technologies. At the end of the day, it was all man-made anyway.
Yes, I mean, you look at the evolution of people or businesses, it's about constantly reinventing yourself. And you just cannot sit there and say, okay, we got this down pat, this is how it's going to be. Because someone else is going to come along and say, no, we're going to take it to the next level. And then you disappear. Exactly. I said to someone the other day, back when the best means of transportation was the railroad, there were actually people that thought this idea of airplanes was never going to take off and it was always going to be the railroad. Mm-hmm. Well, it's the same thing with business. You cannot stop AI, so you better figure out how does it work for you as opposed to against you. Exactly. How do you make sure that your job isn't going to be eliminated because you have certain skills that line up with that will make you attractive to an organization?
Yeah, like you can use AI to really scale what you're doing already and become more productive. And people are just too worried about, hey, how is this going to replace me? But it's not always a bad thing to replace your work and use AI, because they'll never be able to really put things together the way that you can. And you can use it to become more productive, do the work of 10 developers instead of one by yourself. That's going to make you really valuable to your organization. So yeah, it all goes back to being adaptable and being willing to learn. You have to kind of be a student for a long time.
Yes. And you talk about what companies are looking for. I think that is a big piece of it. Self-awareness and a level of curiosity. There are so many free courses between universities and Coursera and LinkedIn that you can take to build your skills. And not just so you can add on on your resume, you took
not just for credentialing,
but it's about meaningful skills that are going to be relevant, that make you more attractive.
Yeah. I think that you're spot on, Kevin. You're just spot on. So really, my question from there is, how do you help people get jobs every day? And on the other side, how do you help recruiters become better?
Well, the first part, how do I help people get jobs? I have worked with a lot of younger people who are, coming out of school. And in case I'm just got finished working with a young man who was in the United States Navy for 10 years, had some really impressive positions and was, pivoted into the public sector. And it just simple things like helping his resume speak to an audience that doesn't understand military terminology, or helping a person coming right out of school to really think in terms of, not looking at what they've done in the past and what has been in college, but what is it going to take for them to be attractive to an organization? And I think one of the big pieces is giving people an opportunity to do mock interviews, to really anticipate certain questions and be thoughtful about how they answer those questions, as opposed to, having a brain freeze. The second part, help recruiters. I think it takes candid conversations about the process. This is something I talk about a great deal. If you have somebody who's top talent that's going to come before you, it needs to be clear, what does the interview process look like from the standpoint of number of people, who the people are they'll be interviewing, how quickly they will get feedback, and should they require some kind of project to express that up front. I think sometimes it drags on way, way, way too long. And honestly, I think before organizations decide to go outside, if they're also thinking about doing it internally, don't have 5 people come spend their time, prepare themselves, only to be told they want internal. So I think it's got to be really quick.
It's so rude.
A great process that's not wasting people's time, that shows the respect for that individual, and really to be clear that this is what we want to do.
Yeah, how you do anything is how you do everything. And, the process starts with the interviews for these companies. If you're going to have a good and enjoyable relationship with a company based on how they've approached you and how they kept you through that interview process up until offer. You can
speaks volumes. It absolutely speaks volumes. You get a very good sense of how they operate, how quickly they move, and the things that are important to them.
100%.
Listen, I've come across situations where 8 or 9 people are interviewing a candidate. Is that really necessary? If you can't get your perspective on an alignment and an agreement in 3 people, then there's something wrong within the organization.
Too much bureaucracy.
Yeah, bureaucracy. Yeah.
Those are the type of things that we gotta kind of skim out. You gotta cut that fat and get to effective decision making in a company. And I feel like if you're really working in unison, it's like you said, 3 people is more than enough, because those 3 people should have the same opinions as everybody else in their department if you selected and built the team the right way in the first place.
Well, I have a quick story for you. I know of someone who interviewed for a job, had 2 interviews, which is great, was offered the job, went in on the first day, showed up, and this person walked over them and said, "Who are you?" And the person said their name, and this is my first day on the job. It was their direct supervisor who had no idea
that they have a new hire.
And that person has told me they're uncomfortable around that person, and I'm sure it had to do with the fact that somebody was hired to work for them and they weren't included. So just crazy.
Yeah, that's insane. We have to really work on our processes. I feel like it depends on company size, but sometimes HR doesn't communicate properly with the departments they're hiring with, and that gap creates uncomfortable situations for new onboardees.
And then there's organizations where HR has got it buttoned down and it works like clockwork and everyone's happy.
Yeah. It's a slow and steady race, but I think, having a strong HR is kind of one of the most essential pieces to having a strong company. The people build your company, right? They are the ones that come in and drive value at the end of the day. Your product is honestly shelf line compared to the type of people that are working for you nowadays. If you have really good customer service, people come back to you, and they might not just be looking at the quality of whatever you're selling to them.
Right. The product is critical.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the ability to execute and deliver an experience that kind of validates the purchase, and we're talking retail, the purchase, that you're not going to get the loyalty of that customer. It's going to be tainted.
Yeah, I agree.
And the landscape is competitive, so you're out there fighting for that person's future business with you.
Yeah. Like it's actually really funny. I've had the experiences where I'm out and I'm shopping. It's a retail situation, and the person that I'm trying to get information from for the product is just rude to me. And you just walk out of that store and you go right next door to their competitor. So you got to make sure that the people that you're hiring really don't do that. It doesn't matter if you're having a bad day or not, and you got to be able to identify it for that early on.
And I think, again, getting back to technology, there are so many things that organizations can do with, for example, a frontline person that you're talking about today with, this little device. Mm-hmm. As a consumer, I could walk in with more information that associate if the organization is not putting the learning and development in place and using tools like, micro learning sessions that a person can stay on top of the value of the product, and answer all of the logical questions that you can anticipate from a customer.
Yeah. Well, that's a different conversation altogether about like human capital development.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe our next episode, if next season we could have you back and discuss that.
I would love that.
That's
It actually is a subject that I feel very, very strongly about. If
yeah.
as a retailer, if you want to relish and do well, you better make sure that that customer facing, and I call them ambassadors,
Mhm.
is able to, put that exclamation point on the experience.
Yeah, I agree. And to our audience, I think you guys should definitely hit the link in the description and visit Kevin's LinkedIn. And anybody that's listening, that's hiring for retail, I promise Mr. Finnegan over here knows exactly how to get you the best qualified talent for your business. And Kevin, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate the time and the conversation, and hope to be talking to you again soon.